The sound of tearing paper was louder than any alarm the bank had ever installed. It sliced through the lunchtime murmur, through the hum of fluorescent lights, through the quiet assumptions hanging in the air. When the pieces struck his chest and slid to the marble floor, no one moved, no one spoke. 12 people watched a man be reduced to suspicion in real time, and in that frozen moment, the bank revealed exactly what it believed about who deserved trust. Evan Brooks stood perfectly still. He didn't flinch, didn't bend down, didn't raise his voice. His hands stayed at his sides, fingers loose, shoulders square. Years of discipline held him upright while humiliation tried to drag him down. Across the counter, the branch manager's breathing was sharp and fast, her face flushed with a confidence that came from believing she was protected by policy, by walls, by power that never questioned itself. It was 12:21 p.m. at Harborstone Bank, Center City, Philadelphia. The lunch rush was in full swing, suits and briefcases packed shoulder to shoulder, money moving without friction for people who looked like it belonged to them. Evan had chosen this hour on purpose. Visibility mattered. He carried a worn leather briefcase, the kind that looked older than the building because it was. Inside it sat one check, clean and unmistakable. 8 figures. The culmination of a decade spent building a cybersecurity firm no one had believed in until it was too profitable to ignore. He hadn't come to show off. He'd come to deposit what he earned, the way his mother taught him. Walk in, speak clearly, expect fairness. Evan believed in systems, even when they didn't believe in him. That belief was being tested now, shredded into quarters on a polished counter. Security, the manager said again, louder this time, as if repetition could turn accusation into fact. Remove him. The guard hesitated. Not because he doubted her authority, but because something about Evan didn't match the story she was telling. Evan wasn't panicking. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't angry. He looked like someone waiting for a clock to run out on someone else. 53 minutes earlier, Evan's morning had been quiet. His son, Lucas, had argued over cereal, insisting the blue bowl mattered. Evan had laughed, kissed his head, promised to be home early. The check sat in his briefcase like a weight, not heavy because of its value, but because of what it represented. He'd almost deposited it digitally, almost spared himself this ritual. But he wanted to walk into a bank as himself, not as a username. At the counter, when the manager first saw the check, her smile had stiffened. Then came the ID, then the second ID, then the questions that weren't really questions. Where did this come from? What do you do? Who do you work for? Each one landed heavier than the last. Evan answered calmly, methodically, as if facts could outrun bias. They couldn't. When she'd picked up the phone and called security, the room shifted. Evan felt it. The line behind him leaned back, bodies distancing themselves from risk they hadn't earned. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A man stared at his phone too intently. Silence became complicity. Now the pieces of the check lay between them, evidence of a decision already made. Evan reached into his briefcase slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a plain envelope. He knelt, gathered each piece of paper with care, and slid them inside. He stood again and looked at the manager, his voice low, controlled. "What's your full name?" She scoffed, but something in his tone unsettled her. "You don't get to interrogate me," she snapped. "You're done here." That was when the doors opened. A man in a tailored navy suit stepped inside, phone still at his ear, mid-sentence. He stopped when he saw the crowd, when he saw the guard, when he saw the envelope in Evan's hand. His eyes lifted, locked onto Evan's face, and the color drained from his own. He ended the call without a word. "Mr. Brooks," he said quietly. The lobby inhaled as one. The manager turned, confused. "Richard, this man—" Richard didn't look at her. "Sir," he said to Evan, the word careful, waited. "Please stay." That single syllable detonated everything she thought she understood. Evan tilted his head slightly. "Stay for what?" Richard swallowed. He had spent 20 years in banking. He knew acquisitions. He knew valuation. He knew exactly who Evan Brooks was because his firm had tried and failed to land his business twice. He also knew what this scene looked like from the outside, from any angle. "I need to understand what happened here," Richard said, though his eyes already told him he did. The manager laughed nervously. "It's nothing. Fraud prevention. He brought in a fake check." Richard finally turned to her. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was precise. "Did you verify it?" She hesitated. "We followed procedure." "Did you verify it?" he repeated. Silence answered. Richard bent down, picked up a fragment that hadn't made it into the envelope. 8 zeros stared back at him. He closed his eyes. Evan spoke before he could. "Your manager destroyed my property, accused me of a crime, and called security, all without making a single verification call, in front of witnesses." Richard nodded slowly. "I see that." "No," Evan corrected. "You see it now." The difference mattered. Phones were out now, not hidden, open, recording. The room had shifted from observer to participant. Evan felt it, the balance tipping. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't threatened. He'd simply stood still long enough for authority to trip over itself. Richard straightened. "Miss Keller," he said to the manager, his voice firm, "step away from the counter." Her mouth opened, closed. She stepped back. Evan met Richard's eyes. "I won't handle this privately," he said. "I won't be moved to an office. I won't be quiet." Richard nodded again, slower this time. Understood. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, time stretched thin, heavy with consequence. Evan didn't know yet how far this would go. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Respect offered late is not respect. It's damage control. And the bank was about to learn the cost of the difference. The quiet that followed was heavier than the noise that came before it. People didn't rush back to their phones. They didn't resume their conversations. They watched, because something irreversible had begun. Evan Brooks stood in the same spot where he had been accused, but the power in the room had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. It shifted the way gravity does when you finally notice you've been standing on the wrong side of it. Richard cleared his throat. "Everyone," he said, projecting calm that no longer belonged to him. "There will be a brief pause in service." No one argued. No one needed to be told twice. The guard stepped back. The line dissolved into clusters of witnesses who knew instinctively that this was no longer about a deposit. Evan didn't move when Richard gestured toward the glass-walled office. He spoke first. "If we talk, it's here." His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "And it's on record." Richard glanced at the phones pointed in their direction and nodded. "That's fair." Miss Keller stood rigid, her earlier certainty evaporating into something brittle. She tried to speak. "I was following protocol." "Stop!" Richard said sharply. The word landed like a gavel. "You will not speak until asked." Her face flushed, then paled. For the first time since Evan had walked in, she looked unsure of the room's allegiance. Richard turned back to Evan. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not as a courtesy, as a responsibility. What happened here should not have happened." Evan looked past him, at the people who had watched it happen. "Apologies don't rewind minutes," he said. "They don't untear paper. They don't erase what people learn about how they're seen." Richard nodded. "I know." "No," Evan said again gently. "You're beginning to." He set the envelope on the counter and opened it, laying out the torn pieces with care. The act was deliberate, almost ceremonial. Cameras leaned closer. "This check represented a decade of work," he continued. "It was treated like a threat, not because of evidence, because of perception." Richard swallowed. "We will replace it." "You can't," Evan replied. "And you shouldn't try. This isn't about the money anymore." That was when a woman near the entrance spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. "He didn't do anything wrong," she said. "We all saw it." Heads nodded. Another man raised his phone higher. The room was no longer neutral. Richard turned toward the crowd. "If anyone here feels uncomfortable, you're free to leave." No one moved. Evan met Richard's gaze. "Here's what will happen next," he said. "I will take my business elsewhere. I will share exactly what happened here with the appropriate regulators. And I will not sign anything that asks me to pretend this was an exception. Miss Keller inhaled sharply. You're overreacting, she said before she could stop herself. Evan turned to her. His expression was calm, but his eyes were unyielding. You mistook my composure for weakness, he said. That's a common error. Richard closed his eyes briefly, then addressed her without turning. Miss Keller, effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation. Please gather your things. The word suspended echoed through the room. It wasn't satisfaction Evan felt. It was gravity correcting itself. Miss Keller looked around, searching for support that didn't exist. She left without another word. The next 48 hours moved faster than the last 52 minutes. Evan's call to the acquiring company was brief. The reissued check went to another institution, one that asked one question and processed the deposit. Word spread anyway. A recording surfaced, then another. Witnesses reached out. Stories followed. By the end of the week, the bank released a statement. It was careful, non-committal. It acknowledged an incident. It promised review. It avoided the word discrimination. The public wasn't satisfied. Neither was Evan. He met with counsel. He listened more than he spoke. He weighed the cost of noise against the cost of silence. When the formal complaint was filed, it wasn't dramatic. It was precise. Dates, times, names, patterns. It named the thing without spectacle. The hearing came 3 weeks later. Miss Keller testified first. Her answers were clipped, rehearsed. She cited training, policy, risk mitigation. When asked why she hadn't verified the check, she paused too long. When asked why security was called, her explanation thinned. Richard testified next. He didn't defend the decision. He defended the system until the questions revealed what the system rewarded. Caution without context, authority without accountability. When Evan took the stand, the room was full. He didn't embellish. He didn't accuse. He described the tearing sound, the eyes on him. The moment respect arrived only after recognition. I didn't need to be known, he said. I needed to be treated fairly. The ruling wasn't immediate. Investigations rarely are. But consequences began to stack. Policies were suspended. Training manuals rewritten. An oversight board announced. The bank paid fines that made headlines. Miss Keller's career ended quietly. Months later, Evan walked past the old branch on his way to lunch. The windows reflected the city back at itself. He didn't stop. That night, Lucas asked him why people had been talking about him at school. Evan smiled and knelt to his level. Because sometimes, he said, standing still is louder than shouting. Lucas thought about that, then nodded. Respect didn't come early that day. It arrived late, carrying consequences in its wake. But Evan had learned something enduring. Power doesn't announce itself. It waits, and when it moves, it doesn't need permission.